Lindsay, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Great. It's great to have you. So I figured we'd start with you clearly had a great high school career. And I'm sure at the end of that high school career, you were starting to think about, colleges and universities. What was that going to look like for you? I would imagine you had a number of different options to choose from. So maybe spend a little bit of time just talking about that experience for you and what ultimately led you to choosing Mercer.
Yeah, so it kind of fluctuated throughout high school for me. There was probably at the beginning of high school, I was like, no, I don't think I'm going to even play lacrosse in college. I was kind of more into my friends and I wanted to go to like this big school and kind of do the whole big college thing. Um, and then it was around my junior year where I decided, okay, actually, this is something that I want to like really kind of give my effort to. But I was like, I still want to have like the balance. So maybe I'll do like Division 2, Division 3, like not do like the highest level, just so I could have that balance. I knew I wanted to go to the South. So I actually was like, okay, why don't I just go and look at some schools like in Florida? I don't know why I thought Florida was where I wanted to go.
Right.
Um, but Mercer was along the drive down to Florida. Um, and so my dad was like, why don't we just stop? We'll check it out and then we can go down to the schools in Florida. So we stopped at Mercer and I looked at campus, I met with the coach, and I was like, okay, this is actually really nice. And then I went to the schools in Florida and then had to compare it to Mercer. And that's when I was like, okay, Mercer was so nice, so pretty, and I was really excited that it was a new program. So it was kind of building this new team. So after that, I was like, okay, I guess maybe that got me like excited to play Division 1. I was like, okay, it's a small school. I knew I wanted to go to a smaller school. I went to a really big high school and I didn't think a big school was going to be best for me. So I was like, I know I wanted to go to a small school. Maybe if I still go to a small school and play Division 1, I'll still get kind of that balance. And yeah, I saw the campus and just kind of just decided there. Like it was a very quick decision, I would say. And I probably didn't look at other options past it. I was just like, you know what, this is good enough. I'll go to Mercer.
Yeah. Seems like it was one of those, it just felt right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was, the balance was a big piece that you talked about. And then, at what point was it that first visit with the coach where you sort of realized, okay, this is where the program is at?
Yeah, I think part of it was because it was a new program. And so, kind of the reason it was a new program was they were also relaunching their football program. So, because of
Okay.
Title IX, they had to also include a women's sport alongside the football team.
Got
Um,
it.
so, I got to see all these great new facilities that were shown that were going to be amazing that we got to use and stuff, which we
Yeah.
did. We definitely did, but maybe not to the extent of what it was shown because it was
Right.
obviously for the football team, not the women's lacrosse team.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they definitely kind of showed really cool facilities and different things that we got. So yeah, I think that was like you're so young at the time where you just think it's like this really cool thing.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it definitely was the appeal of it, and I think that's how a lot of kids get kind of recruited.
Yeah. And what appealed to you about that aspect of the program being new and sort of coming into that environment?
Yeah, I think honestly, I knew I wanted to play lacrosse. So I didn't care about going to like a big name school just to say that I was going there. I really wanted to like actually get playing time and be on the
Yeah.
field. So that was really important to me because I think a new program, you have that opportunity much
Yeah.
quicker than you would at a big school. You know, a lot of the times people go to big schools and it's not until their junior, senior year where they actually get to see the field. Um, I knew that a new program would allow me to have the opportunity to get out on the field a lot sooner. So that was
Mm.
something that was important to me, just because, yeah, I didn't care about like how big the school that I was going to. I just knew I loved playing lacrosse and I wanted to actually get out on the field and compete.
Yeah. And what's so interesting about that to me is that you kind of, one thing I always think about is that's one of the hardest decisions for athletes or non-athletes. It's one of your biggest decisions, that kind of phase in your life. And a lot of times when it comes to athletes, it can be easy to get a little bit sidetracked by the sport and, maybe reach and go for a school that you may not play at. And there's aspects of that, which is great too. It's kind of pushing yourself to say, hey, can I play at that elite level? But there's, a lot of players who will end up transferring because they
Mhm.
may not have made that right experience. So I just, I think that's really interesting that you were in that mindset at that age to really have a maturity to go, okay, this is the right situation for me, but I also know that because it's going to give me the opportunity to be out in the field.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing that a lot of young athletes struggle with. I mean, I think I got somewhat lucky in making that decision, but
Yeah.
it's so hard to. I mean, I think back to when I actually made that decision. I mean, hindsight's 2020. I can see it was a good experience, but I didn't really know. Like, I had no idea kind of what I was getting into. Um, because I really don't think you think about that. You get so caught up in the excitement of getting recruited and like
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
like interest in you that sometimes you don't think about those things. And I can look back on it now and be like, oh, okay, this definitely was the right fit for me and these were all the things that I learned, but I probably wasn't thinking about that when I actually made the
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah. So I didn't know what I was getting into. So let's fast forward a little bit where, now you're at campus, it's your freshman year. Maybe talk about just your journey with that specific program. So again, it was a new program. I would imagine there was a lot of ups and downs and learnings along the way. Maybe walk us through sort of that progression from freshman to sophomore year, and some of the key moments in between.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to the recruiting story of, they show you all these exciting things and then you get there and you're like, wait a second, I don't even know if this wasn't this wasn't
Yeah.
what I was shown. And so my freshman year, we had about 20 freshmen coming in. So it was all brand new. And I think once we got there, we also realized maybe the coach at the time wasn't as knowledgeable or maybe
Uh,
in the right position that they should have been
right.
to really create a new program.
Yeah.
So my freshman year was kind of a bit of a disaster. I think we maybe won 2 games. Like, I don't think we won. Yeah, maybe 2 games we won.
Yeah.
Um, and there wasn't as much structure or anything like that. It kind of felt like I was playing on like a club team. Like, I
Mm,
knew going in it was going to be a lot, and then it not being a lot was kind of just not what I expected. Um, so we ended up going through a couple different sets of like assistant coaches and stuff. But once we got like the coach, she's still there now. But she kind of like really established like, okay, this is the direction that we're taking this program and this is where I want it to go. Um, Lots of ups and downs in between. I think we still lost a lot of games throughout the years, but I think the coolest thing was to see the progression of my freshman year. I think, again, maybe won 2 games. And then I ended my career with winning our conference championship. So
wow.
just to see the progression of that was so cool. But I think we came in with 20 freshmen and I think we graduated with 10 or
Wow.
11. So a lot of people, quit, they left,
Right.
kind of did all that. But it's really a bonding thing to
Right.
get to kind of experience all the sucky times and then to end it in that way was just like a really cool thing.
Yeah. What was growth, I guess both ways. So tell me a little bit about what was growth like for the team over that period of time. So you talked about the losses, and it sounds like the coach kind of came in and had more of a vision of where she wanted to take the team, and I'm sure that empowered a lot of you guys. But what was, I don't know, just tell me a little bit about those specific moments in time that you guys saw like the biggest change happening, and what was behind that?
Yeah, I think it kind of is somewhat of a mindset shift that had to happen with a lot of us,
Okay.
and I think it took a while. Some people maybe didn't fully get on board with it,
Okay.
because, like I said, like you come in as a freshman in college, and it wasn't as big of a commitment as I think a lot of us expected. So we
Got
had a lot of freedom, kind of our freshman year, to kind of do what we wanted,
it.
more than I think would be expected of a Division 1 program.
Yeah.
Um, so then when we had this new coach come in, it was okay, like you guys have to come out and we're spending 3 hours at practice. It's not going to be an hour practice of just
Yeah.
kind of doing some drills. It's going to be 3 hours and it's going to be way more intense. And then you're also going to have to wake up and go to lifts and do conditioning and all of that. So I think it was kind of somewhat of a mindset shift that had to happen of, okay, yes, it might get a lot harder and we might not have as much freedom, but it's going to pay off if we actually want to win games and kind of be successful as a team. So I think that was probably like the biggest change. And I think as time went on, more and more people bought into it. And that's what essentially I think ended up allowing us to be so successful in the end. But
Yeah.
I think having a coach who wasn't going to let you just do whatever is super beneficial. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
people look at that as a negative thing of, oh, well, this coach is just trying to like force me to do all this stuff and it's
Yeah.
terrible. But I think it pays off. Like it gives results. So
Yeah.
having someone kind of instill that, I think, is super important, and I think really does make a big difference.
Yeah. What specifically about what she did motivated you?
That's a good question. I think part of it kind of taps into just like my personality, of like who I am, because I actually think what I've learned about myself is I really like structure. Like I like structure. I like when things are hard. When things are easy for me, I don't like that as much. So she kind of always presented difficult things and
Okay.
always was trying to push that. And I think maybe just because of like my personality, I kind of fell more into that and really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Yeah, I would say that's probably, I think maybe it had to do with my personality. If I try to think about like my other teammates, I think it was kind of the same thing, like you kind of have to set the standard and then people rise to it. And I think a
Right.
lot of the times athletes have that mentality just in general of, okay, there's always like something else that I can strive for or like another ceiling that I can try to kind of break through. Um, it's just actually getting the athlete to see that and then
Right.
really buy into it. And I think that's the biggest thing because I think every person has somewhat of that in them. But it really does make a difference when more people around you are doing that and you have someone kind of holding you to that.
Yeah. It's interesting too because you talked about when, the 20 of you came in on your freshman year and sort of this feeling of like it's not really what we thought it might have been. The commitment, having more time than you thought. So that kind of change in perspective, it seems like that was a really big thing for you and the team. It was like because it was almost I'm sensing, I don't know, but it was like a little disappointing maybe. And then it was like as soon as that motivation came in, it's like you guys were like, yeah, let's go.
Yes. Yeah. I think that was exactly it. Like, again, you, as a freshman in college, it's your first time of like really having freedom. And then to like be able to have all that is great, but it wasn't what we kind of signed up for, right? Like, we wanted to be playing a
Right.
sport and doing that. So we wanted that kind of, I don't know, the satisfaction of winning a game or kind of doing all that. So to not have that, I think, was good in some aspects, but kind of difficult. And then I think it presented more of a challenge later on trying to kind of flip that mindset, especially with the whole team who got kind of comfortable in that
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah. What was it like when you and I had an interesting collegiate experience as well with a growing program, and my coach used to say like you're on the bus or you're off the bus. It was kind of that mentality of like, are you with us? Are you going there, or are you not? Walk me through a little bit of maybe some of those athletes that it wasn't right for, and I would imagine that was kind of hard as a team to go through and work through.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a big thing, and I honestly I think it's a personal decision. Like you just have to be able to change that and make that your mindset. And I think the way
Yeah,
you, I think, internally speak about things or perceive things completely changes your experience with it. So, like, I can think of probably the people who quit or didn't last. They were probably the ones who were complaining the most or really
yeah,
negative in how they spoke about, like, oh, I have to wake up and go and do
right,
this, or oh, I have to go to practice for 3 hours. Um, Instead of, okay, yeah, it might suck, but everything sucks in some regard. It's how you
yeah,
it's kind of like you choose what sucks. So you
yeah,
kind of decide. And I think personally I think it is a personal decision. And like,
yeah,
yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. You know, like it can suck having to do all that, but for me, like having wins and like being competitive and actually getting to play was so much more satisfying, even when there were some mornings when we were having to do conditioning and I wanted to pass out and I wanted to cry, right? Like
yeah,
it's that sucked, but then I also got to live and have like the best experiences of winning games with and like
yeah,
bonding with these people that totally outweigh the conditioning. I think if you focus on how much the conditioning sucks, then that's all you're going to think about. And that's
yeah,
what's going to be your experience. If you focus on the other side of things, I think it changes your perspective on the sucky parts. And I think
yeah,
that's something that I think is very difficult for athletes to do. And I think it's
yeah,
something that you have to practice it and work on it just like you have to practice like the fundamental skills of your sport. And I think that's something that's really lacking just with athletes and in sports in general. We spend hours practicing and going to practice, but we maybe do like an hour long kind of session with the team on like personality traits or mindset stuff, but
yeah,
you're not really spending much time with that. And I think that also goes back to transferring it over outside of your sport. It's like
yeah,
your mentality and what you can learn from your sport is actually the only thing that transfers over past your sport, right? Like
right,
my ability to shoot a lacrosse ball or anything like that, or my knowledge of lacrosse, really doesn't benefit me at all after college ended. But
right,
the things and the like mental skills that I learned from lacrosse are
yeah,
the only things that carry over. And I think
yeah,
that's somewhat I don't know, but it seems like a lot of athletes don't fully understand that. And I think that's what
yeah,
then makes it hard to transition out
yeah.
of playing.
That's a great segue. And what do you think what do you think the reason behind that is?
I think, and I think I don't know. I think more and more nowadays it is like playing a sport and like the excitement and like I don't know, just, yeah, like the excitement of it is
Mhm.
so focused on, like now I think it's even younger and younger. Like kids are playing on travel teams and like all their whole focus is getting recruited. So you do root a lot of like everything. I mean, I think even personally, like I was so focused on just lacrosse and playing lacrosse that
Yeah,
I didn't even really think about like, okay, what do I want to do after lacrosse or anything
yeah,
like that. So you get so caught up in just the sport that you don't see past it. And I think that's sometimes then what makes it difficult to fully understand like, okay, these are the skills that I'm learning from lacrosse, but how do I actually apply them after the fact? And I think that should be talked about a lot sooner than trying to figure it out a few years after you're done playing and you don't know how to apply them outside of your sport.
right. So talk a little bit about your personal journey in that. So it sounds like, and this is from some of our pre-discussions as well, that there was a point in time where it wasn't a focus. as you were saying, when you were in college focusing on lacrosse, and then you sort of got to that, maybe that point where you understood your skill sets and the things that maybe were transferable. But then there's like that final step of connecting the dots and saying, okay, I know my skills, and now I know what I need to do to carry those through to whatever I'm doing in my career or whatever I'm doing in my life. So maybe walk through, what was your process in getting there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an ongoing process and something that I'm
Yeah,
still kind of trying to figure out. But I think, yeah, you learn all these skills from your sport, like hard work, like discipline, like,
right,
all those basic skills. And so easily, I think it's easy for athletes to transfer that over into their job. Like, I think that happens naturally. I think that's why a lot of companies want to hire athletes. But I think the missing piece is, I don't know if athletes fully, they don't spend the time, or at least personally, I didn't spend the time thinking about what I actually, what actually motivates me, and kind of like, my
right,
purpose, or like my why in life. And I think when there's that disconnect, you can do all of those skills, but it's harder to like really kind of apply them when it's towards something that you don't feel passionate about. And I think that's why, even with lacrosse, like, I was so passionate about playing lacrosse that I was more willing to do and put in the time and kind of hone all of those skills. And I think that's somewhat of the disconnect, because athletes, or I'll speak personally, I spent so much of my time, it was just lacrosse. It was like, okay, lacrosse, and then I'm going to get a degree, and then I'll figure it out after. And I always had like in the back of my head like what I wanted to do, or like kind of somewhat like a broad idea of what I wanted to do. But I never really spent the time of what it looked like, or how to actually kind of get there. And so I think you get kind of caught in, okay, well, now I'm in this job. I'm going to do all the things that I know are going to make me successful in this job, but it doesn't necessarily match up with what you maybe feel passionate about. And I think, yeah, sometimes then you get comfortable. And for me, I didn't realize that I could be applying all these skills. Like, think about, like, if I try to equate my experience playing lacrosse to what it could look like just in like a life situation.
yep,
Okay, my freshman year, we were a losing team, right? We maybe won 2 games. By the end, after 4 years, we won like the conference championship. So then, if I try to think about how to apply that to life, okay, I have to actually realize that I have to give it time for something to develop if I'm really passionate about it. And I have to just be disciplined to do all of those like skills that I learned on a daily basis. And then anything that comes from it is like a byproduct of it, but it's the day to day that matters. And I think, yeah, I think that's kind of what I've recently tried to do, is like, I have to be okay that I might not see success, but like, all I wanted to do was just play lacrosse because I love doing it every day.
yeah,
So like, that's how I have to look at something that I'm passionate about. Like, you just have to do it every day, and eventually you'll get something from it. If you do it every day, like,
right,
eventually something's going to happen. And I think it's really hard, especially for athletes, because we have this mindset of like, I need to be successful, and I want to be like, I want to win, right? Like, that's a big part of it. And at least me personally, I think that's somewhat, it's a really good thing, but it also sometimes creates this fear of like, okay, what if I do fail and
yeah.
I'm not successful in this? And I have to go back to, no, you're just doing it because you're passionate about it. If you do it every day and you do these skills that you learned from your sport, if you do them every day, you're going to see something from it.
That's a great insight. The connection between, okay, I know what my skills are, and I know, at some point you get to that stage where you say, okay, like you said, a lot of companies are looking to hire athletes because they know they have that skill set. And then individually, athletes might get to that point, maybe early on in their careers and what they're doing and figuring out, okay, this is how certain skills and experiences that I had can apply. But the connection to passion, which you said, is super interesting because it's almost like a amplifier. And when you're following a pursuit or something that you're passionate about, the rest of that sort of falls into place.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
exactly. I mean, I think about myself, like, I was working jobs that I was doing well in and I was being successful in, but
yeah,
it didn't align with what I feel like I'm more passionate about, and I
yeah,
could see that I wasn't being as disciplined or working as hard as I knew that
right,
I wanted to. And I think
yeah,
that was a big realization for me of like, okay, I know that I can do all these things, but I'm not doing them towards this thing. And I think it's
yeah,
because like that lack of passion. And I think it's really important.
yeah. So maybe talk a little bit about some of your early kind of years working, and what was that moment when you kind of realized this?
Yeah, I mean, so right out of college, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was like, maybe I'll go coach lacrosse, like,
Yeah,
but I was like, well, coaches don't make a lot of money, so I don't think that's what I wanted to do because I wanted
yeah,
other things in my life.
yeah,
So I was like, okay, why don't I'll just get a job now and then kind of figure it out. So I got a job at a great company, um, and I really enjoyed it. Like I liked all the people there and all of that. And I think it was great. And then I went on to work at the agency and I loved that. Like I learned so much and I liked the fast pace of it. But again, I knew that I knew how hard I could work and I knew that I wasn't necessarily applying myself in the way that I should be with something that I'm doing. And I think that was probably the big realization of like, you have to find something that you want to work really hard at. And I think when you do, that's when I think you figure it out. And I think sometimes nowadays, a lot of people just want the easy route. And I
yeah,
think it's not as fulfilling. So, at least personally, like, I want something where I have to work hard and it's difficult for me. And I think I got to a point where it was like, okay, I don't really feel like this job is that difficult for me and I'm not working that hard because it doesn't like fire me up. Right.
yeah,
And I think that's kind of like when I realized, okay, I have to find something that kind of ignites that because
yeah,
if I don't have that, then I'm not going to apply myself in the way that I should.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I would say that's a very recent realization.
yeah. That's great. And so you got to that point where it's okay, I'm not being as challenged as much as I want to be. Perhaps I'm not quite pursuing my passion. So let's take that next step. So you've had that realization. What did you do? And I think this might be helpful for people who are listening. What exactly did you do, or what steps did you take to help you get to where your passion resides?
I think some of it was just kind of like forced on me of just like,
Okay.
okay, now you're at a place where you got to figure it out. And so, yeah, I don't know. I would say I always knew, like, I've always had in my head that I want to do some type of business that has a purpose to it, that I can help people,
Yeah.
but that I can also, like, make money and, like, make a profit from. I knew that was kind of um, important to me. So I like that kind of, like the profit for purpose kind of business
Right.
model was something that I always had like this draw to. And so I think I got to a point where it was like, okay, you gotta just like do it or at least take the chance to do it. Um, I would say I'm still very much in that stage.
Right.
So I am still trying to navigate like, okay, you got to keep pushing through and doing it. Um, or else like it's not going to happen and you're going to have to just go back to having a job. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Part of it was accepting that, okay, I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to not care what other people think, and I think that's something that isn't always easy for me.
Yeah.
Um, but if I want to actually do something that I am passionate about, I have to let that go. So I'm still very much in the process of kind of working through that, and then really just like daily kind of trying to keep working towards what I want to do. So yeah, I think it's a daily thing, and I think it's not always easy,
Yep.
but I think a lot of the times, yeah, we don't talk about that part of it.
Right. And
We
what's
just
it that
show.
you want to do?
So I really want to work with athletes going into college, honestly, to help them try to navigate
Yeah.
and avoid this kind of situation that I went through.
Right.
I think if you do kind of, if you can shift your perspective going into college, understanding that your sport is a tool that is going to, it really does give you the greatest, I would say, experience on how to deal with life. But if it's only focused in the sport, it's really hard after to actually understand how to apply it.
Yeah.
So I think having the perspective before you get to college of like, okay, what do you want your day to day life to look like after you graduate when your sport is done? Because it ends, unfortunately. At some point, you aren't going to get to play anymore. If you're lucky, you get 4 years, but it's going to end. So, how can you start preparing yourself to view your sport and learn all these skills? Like, understand everything that you're learning and actually know how to apply it after the fact. And I think if people can have that mindset or even just like understanding or just perspective of that before they get to college, I think it would negate a lot of the things after the fact. Like, yeah, I think that's a big part
Yeah.
of it. So yeah,
Well,
that's
and
what I would like to do.
that sounds amazing, and I think you're going to be great at it. I would say too, something you touched on there is there's such an aspect of athletic identity and identity that um you know I would say kind of fuels that, because like you said, you're a lot of youth athletes now, like from a very young age, that is what the focus is. So much of who they are and their identity
Mhm.
becomes associated with the sports that carries through high school, that goes through college. And then it's like, wow, I no longer have my sport. And who am I? And there's so much exploration that has to happen and soul searching and figuring it out. And a lot of what they say and a lot of what the research shows is that the earlier athletes can start thinking about who they are outside of their sport, what ignites them, what are their passions outside of, being on the field or on the court or whatever it may be. So it's just, yeah, it's a really important area, because if you can start high school transition into college, that's going to make, come senior year, it will make the transition that much smoother.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, another aspect of it is like it will help you when you're in college too, because
Uh,
you're not going to be like your life isn't going to end when something bad happens at lacrosse. And I think back to my team and like and myself, like if something bad happened, it was the end of the world and like it was the worst thing ever. And I think also shifting that perspective and kind of having that perspective, it's going to help you enjoy the sport when you're in it a lot more.
right. Because there's more than the sport.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
And yeah, yeah. And that's definitely hard to do. I mean, the identity thing, I think you hit it
Right.
spot on. Like, it's very hard to kind of find that outside of it when that was your whole life for probably most of your life. Yeah, so to find it outside of that is definitely challenging.
Yeah. So I'd love to kind of move into, we've both had some great conversations outside of the podcast just around life after sports, around, what athletes are going through. And, I think this is a personal point of view, but I think there's a lot of people who are out there who are doing great things in this space and really looking to help athletes make that transition. But nothing's really scaled in a way, I think, to have the greatest impact. And I always get curious about that. And a lot of what I love about the conversations I have outside of the podcast is just getting former athletes insight into that. Like, it's clear that this is so hard, but what, in your opinion, might be sort of preventing us from scaling something where where athletes know where they're going to go, right? Athletes know where they're going to get help and support. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll speak personally, and I would also I think a lot of athletes feel this way. We kind of were instilled in us, like fight through it, like get through it, like you're tough, like that's kind of like the mentality of an athlete, kind of like fight. So I think a lot of the times we don't want to talk about it. I know I struggle talking about it because I think too, as an athlete, you always want to be presenting the best version of yourself. And so I think it's almost maybe helping athletes understand that the best version of yourself is still going to have issues. Like, think about playing your sport. Like, okay, yeah, we showed that we won a conference championship, but no one saw the hours and tears that we all went throughout that process. And I think, athletes, we just want to show the big wins. And it's really hard for us to show, well, there were a lot of tears and a lot of bad things along the way. And I think that's something I still struggle with today of like, it's okay to show that side of it. And I think social media and even just like the culture that we live in makes it even more amplified and difficult because everyone's just showing, the highlight reel instead of, okay, well, you did this every single day or you worked hard for 4 years to finally get to this. And I think, athletes, I think it's almost amplified with athletes because we're kind of taught to be tough and kind of push through things. And I think showing that you can still be tough and push through and still struggle is important because every athlete did that, right? With our sport, right. We all struggled at some point and then had success from it. Yeah. And so I think a lot of it too is not understanding how to apply that to life. Yeah. Like it was easy for me to struggle in lacrosse. Like it was like, okay, yeah, like this sucks, but then we get to that. And I've asked this question, like, why am I not okay with talking about struggling in my life, but I'm okay with showing that I got, I don't know, like a promotion or something like that. Like, right. Why could I do that with my sport and I can't do it now? Yeah. So that's still, I think, something that I'm not sure. Like, I don't know why I'm still kind of working through. Like, why can't I do it in life when I could do it easily with a sport? Like, I loved the struggle of lacrosse. So why is that different in life?
Yeah. It's such an interesting observation because within the context of sport, struggle is shown all the time. Athletes training, athletes pushing themselves, the victory of defeat, like all that sort of stuff. When it comes to anything outside of the sport, exactly like you're saying, all of a sudden showing that struggle when it comes to mental health, it's completely different. It's okay to show yourself struggling, lifting weights or pushing through a run or whatever it may be, but it's not okay to say like, I'm not okay, or, more emotional aspects of things outside your sport.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think talking about it helps. And I think there's also two sides of it. Like, it's accepting, okay, yeah, I don't feel great and I'm not okay right now, but you still have to have the side of it where, okay, I'm going to push through it. Like, I think that's a great benefit of being an athlete and understanding and learning that skill of like, okay, I can still feel not good, but I'm still going to work through it and push through it. So I think too, it's somewhat getting more challenging. And I think for athletes too, they're struggling because now there's this so much emphasis on, well, you talk about it, and like mental health is kind of gotten so big. And I think, yes, like you need to talk about it, but it's almost kind of also, I don't know what the right word is, kind of making it seem that the resilience part is not good. And I think they
Right.
work together of like, yes, talk about it and the struggle and all of that, but it's still a really good aspect to be able to push through and work through
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I think they're two separate things that work together. And I feel like they've kind of recently kind of been like, well, it's one or the other. And
Right.
they need to be looked at as like, no, they're two things that are separate, but when put together are really beneficial to you.
It's I really like that because sometimes things are seem to be viewed very black and white, and it's okay to carry and have different feelings at the same time, and they can
Mhm.
be contradictory.
Mhm.
And that's okay. You can be resilient and vulnerable at the same time. It could depend on the moment in day, it could depend on the situation, and it's almost like a permission.
Yeah, totally. And I just think I think talking about it more and just having people understand that side of it, I think it's what's going to help. So hopefully you're the
Right.
one to do it and scale this.
Let's hope so. Well, I so appreciate your time and insight. It's been really helpful, and I think there's many athletes out there that are going to benefit from this. So I'll end it with one final question for you. I always like to think about, if there's a lacrosse player, someone, yourself a few years back, what might you offer up to them, a junior or senior in their career who are going to transitioning, who are transitioning? What would you offer up to them, in terms of advice or thoughts?
Yeah, I would say like if you really tap into or understand all the things that you did learn from your sport, try to find where you feel those things in your day-to-day life. So like what ignites you to want to work harder. And I think really lean into that. Um, I think also if you have an idea or you want to do something, like athletes, we did learn all these like great skills. And if you apply it, it probably will maybe not pay off, but like you're going to feel more fulfilled. Because again, your sport, just like your sport, like it was a journey. The reason you loved playing lacrosse was just, or playing your sport was just because you were playing, right? So find what makes or gives you that same feeling in your life and then just do it every day.
It's like, what's the next game?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks again, Lindsay. So appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you. This was so fun.
You got it. Hey everyone, it's Kyle. Thanks so much for listening. I truly believe that every story can make a difference for this next generation of retiring athletes. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or give us a follow if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.